Good morning. A ton happens in this week's Parsha Lecha. So here's a quick overview. First, God tells Abram to leave Haran with his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot, and all of his servants, and go to wherever God shows him. So, at age 75, Abram and his whole house leaves and goes to what we later find out as Canaan. When Abram gets there, God assigns the land to Abram's offspring. Then Abram goes to Egypt, then he comes back from Egypt, and then Lot leaves because it's too crowded living with Abram. 14 years later, there's a big war. Lot gets captured by invaders. Abram finds the invaders and finds Lot. Sometime later, God comes to Abram in a vision. God talks to him and foreshadows his offspring being slaves for 400 years, after which they shall be free, and in 4 generations they will return to Canaan. Sarai couldn't make children, so Sarai had Hagar be Abram's second wife. Hagar gets pregnant, then runs away because Sarai was treating her harshly. God finds Hagar and says she should go back and that she will have a boy and name him Ishmael. And she then gives birth to Ishmael. 13 years later, God comes to Abram and gives him all the rules about circumcision. Abram, at 90 years old, and all the men in his household then get circumcised. Something that I thought was interesting in this parsha were all the times God talks about Abram's offspring, especially the different analogies he uses. For the first time, he used the analogy of dust. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, then your offspring too can be counted. Ka'afar ha'aretz. Then the analogy of stars. Your offspring will be as numerous as the stars. Kochavei hashamayim. And later in the parsha, in Vayera, God uses the analogy of sand. I will make your descendants as numerous as the sand on the seashore. V'chachol asher al safat hayam. Why? Maybe God is using different analogies when Abram can actually see them. For example, when Abram was looking around Canaan, God compares his offspring to dust. When Abram is sleeping, looking up, God compares his offspring to the stars. You want analogies that are around you so that you know how big or how small they are. You don't want a caveman coming up to you and saying, wow, that building is as big as a woolly mammoth, because you have no clue how big a woolly mammoth is. So maybe God knows that and is trying to use different analogies because at that moment, that's what Abram can see. Although there might be another reason to use the analogy of sand or stars, because of the actual meaning of it. Imagine you went to the ocean and there was 1 grain of sand, or you went outside at night and there was 1 star in the night sky. It would be weird. Maybe nowadays you only see a couple stars, but before when they didn't have light pollution, the sky was filled with stars. 1 grain of sand or 1 star isn't that strong or important, but if you have millions or billions of stars and sand, they make up something. And maybe that's something God wants us to know. Maybe we don't need billions of people, but together we are stronger. Now there's one more question I wanted to bring up. In the desert, why did God compare Abram's offspring to dust? Why not sand? Sand is everywhere when you're in the desert. Well, maybe the dust actually means something. After all, we all eventually turn into dust. So maybe God is telling Abram that not only will we have a lot of offspring, but a lot of dust because of it, since this place is where Israelites will live forever. So whether you think that God used different analogies because it's easier to relate to, or because they actually mean different things, I think it's interesting anytime there's repetition in the Torah with slight alterations. Because maybe it means something, or maybe it doesn't. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.